Well, it's 1 minute after the hour. I am Steve Parrish, and I want to welcome everybody. I'm the co-director of the New York Life Center for Retirement Income at the American College of Financial Services, and I very much want to thank you for signing up. I will fill you in on the CE process shortly, but first I want to set up what we're going to be covering today. And today we're going to talk about a key, but sometimes ignored opportunity for financial advisors, and that's the opportunity to be generous. You can call it self-enlightened or acting for the greater good or just good business. Today we're going to discuss prosperity for purpose. And we have a well-known expert on the subject here to enlighten us, and that's Ellen Rogin. Now, I just want to caution, this is not a discussion about charitable planning and the tax benefits derived from this practice. Yeah, we're still going to talk about money, but coming from a different perspective, I'm excited about that. To borrow a line from our guest website, and I'm quoting from your website, Ellen, money is complicated. Sometimes it can be a source of great stress and confusion, and other times it brings tremendous joy and fulfillment. Even smart, successful people can feel fearful and mystified when it comes to their money, end quote. So Ellen Rogin is going to discuss a better way through creating prosperity on purpose. Well, let me introduce Ellen. If you haven't already run across her at meetings or in readings, Ellen Rogin wrote the New York Times bestseller on turning your vision into reality called Picture Your Prosperity. She's an acclaimed speaker, a TEDx presenter, blogger, 20-year veteran of the financial service industry, a certified financial planner and CPA. I'll tell you a little more. I'll let her tell you a little more about her practice, but let's first get to know Ellen. First of all, welcome, Ellen.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. Thanks, Steve.
Great. So let's set this whole thing up. First, philanthropy. Philanthropy is an important subject, and at the American College, we include the well-known CAP designation that some of you on this call have earned from us. For the benefit of others, the Chartered Advisor in Philanthropy, or CAP designation, provides you with the knowledge and the tools that you need to help clients articulate and advance their highest aspirations for self and family and society, and the things Ellen's going to talk about. But Ellen, I think you're coming from a different angle, so let me just start with that question. You talk about generosity. How are you using that term?
Yeah, I'm using the term generosity really in a broad sense. The dictionary defines generosity as showing a readiness to give more of something, as in money or time, and that's more than is strictly necessary or expected. Also showing kindness towards others. So yes, I'm talking about financial generosity, but also generosity in kind acts.
Okay, and that is different than just talking philanthropy. I guess the linked question is, why do you think generosity is an important focus for advisors who we have on the phone here, advisors who want to grow or maintain their business?
So I think it makes sense to start with what's happening in the industry. We know the industry is changing dramatically. The old ways of doing business really just don't work anymore. Start with fintech has changed the world. People are using their mobile and internet and cloud to connect with financial services, and SureTech as well, and robo-advisors and budgeting programs, and they're seeking financial information in a different way. And so what that means is the traditional ways of adding value we know have changed dramatically. And I think that advisors honestly are kidding themselves if they think they can't be replaced and really aren't deliberate about how they're truly adding value and connecting in meaningful ways with clients. We know that the industry is aging, right? So 20% of advisors are over 65 and the average age is 55, and only 11% of advisors are under age 40. And I think there's a tendency when advisors have been in the business for a long time to just feel like they can coast. But if you're not growing, your business is declining. And I believe that the rate of decline is going to happen much more rapidly than it has in the past if you're not deliberate about your branding in your business and why people would want to do business with you. I also see that over time, advisors can get bored with what they're doing and kind of dial it in. You know, you may be making really good money, especially when the markets are up. Um, but it's not uncommon to start to lose purpose and passion in your work. And a focus on generosity is a way to give you more meaning and purpose. So, another part that's important is that having a personal and corporate social responsibility plan is more important than ever. So, corporate social responsibility is a term that's used to describe a company's effort to improve society in some way. And if you care at all about working with younger clients or your clients' kids, this is really crucial. More than 9 in 10 millennials will switch brands to associate with one with a cause. And it's not just important with clients, and employees are care deeply about having purpose in your work.
Yeah, that makes sense in many ways with fintech now. We're the we're not the provider of information, we're really the translator of information. That makes sense. So I'm sold, but let's get specific. Why don't you tell us more about how a focus on generosity can help advisors, grow their practices in the new reality you talk about?
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the benefits and we'll get to the hows in a bit. But the benefits incorporating generosity really fall into three buckets. It's generosity, how it helps you, your team, and your clients. So let's start with you and your well-being. So there's been lots of studies and research on generosity and generous. One of the interesting ones that I found that came out of Stockholm University and the Institute for Future Studies and the University of South Carolina, what they found is that generous people actually make more money. The study revealed that unselfish people tend to earn higher salaries and compared to selfish ones. And this is kind of logical, right? People want to do business with good people. So it can affect your well being. And it also feels good. But generous people they tend to live longer and it's a way to raise happiness levels. So, really important for you yourself. In terms of working with your team, it can be really important for recruiting. A 2016 study showed that 64% of millennials take into consideration a company's corporate social responsibility when deciding where to work. So it's super important for not only recruiting, but also retention. And in terms of your clients, people want to do business with good people. And having a plan of generosity can put like a corporate halo around your work. Um, in terms of, again, recruiting younger clients, more than 9 in 10 millennials, oh, we said that already, would change brands. But also, if your clients include high net worth individuals, especially women, you know, philanthropy and generosity are super important. Women give more than men to charity, with 93% of high net worth women. Charity is really important, and this is women who earn more than 200,000 or have a net worth of greater than $1 million, not including their home. 93% give to charity, 56% volunteer, 6% participate in impact investing, and 23% serve on nonprofit boards. And that's compared to 87% of male donors and 41% of men who volunteer. And this I found really interesting, that baby boomer women give 89% more to charity than men their age, and that women in the top 25% of income gave 156% more than men in the same group. So this is having a corporate responsibility plan, having clients know that you're generous will help in terms of recruiting and build trust.
Yeah, no, those are some pretty interesting statistics, and it's not just statistics because you've not all our listeners know that you've succeeded in turning these principles into your own practice. Um, how did you develop the ideas of using generosity to grow your business?
So it was really a big part of my marketing plan, and it kind of happened not so deliberately, but a little bit by accident. I started to think about this when I wrote my first book, Great with Money, which was in the early 2000s, and also really switched the way that I looked at setting goals in my business. So if any of you out there were in business in 2002, you may recall there was a recession then. It wasn't as big as 2008, but it was coming out of 9/11 in 2002. The market was down about 17%. And, I had been in business for a while then, but never really experienced that kind of downturn. I mean, the downturns in the 90s were really short. The market would go down 20%, and then the next month it would come back up. And I really shifted my perspective. Most of the people in financial services look at goals in terms of maybe AUM, assets under management, and growing that, number of new clients, profits, revenues, really financial things, which are important. I'm not saying they're not. But what I found is I was really kind of an average producer when I was looking at those. I did okay. They weren't super motivating for me. And when I saw the markets going down and how much stress and pain my clients were in, I really shifted my attention. And what I did was focus on how much they needed our help. More than ever, clients needed my advice. And so a lot of my attention and many of my goals were, how can I serve in a more deep and meaningful way? And in 2002, the market was down 17% and my revenues grew 39% in that year. And I attribute much of it to this shift in perspective. When other advisors were hiding because all they could do was talk about how bad the market was and they weren't reaching out, I wanted to make sure my clients were okay and they felt it. They stayed with me and they referred their friends, and my income grew when typically advisors' income does not grow. So that really started me on this process.
Yeah, and so many advisors really did become advisors because they care about people, and so they probably agree with where you're going and what you're doing, but I suppose they're nervous about doing it. So it would help for us to kind of know some of the specific ways that advisors can really start to build generosity into their own practices and businesses.
Sure. I want to be super specific with strategies that you can use. So let's start with financial giving. So one of the concepts that I've talked about in both of my books, but really was introduced to me by my co-author of my first book, Melissa Burke, was really being deliberate about setting up a financial giving plan. And so I know you all know how important it is, and you tell all your clients about setting up a systematic savings plan, right? We know that's Money 101. But I started setting up a systematic giving plan. So I took a percentage of my income. I would do it quarterly because that's the way my income came in at the time, and would take a percentage of my revenue and put it in a separate account. And this doesn't have to be a big fancy account. It can be a donor advised fund or some fancier strategy. But to start, I was just putting it in a savings account at the time and really just earmarking it for giving. And what I found was a couple things. First of all, I found that my husband and I became more generous because we knew what we had to give. So if a friend of ours was walking, for example, like in a breast cancer walk, we would make a bigger pledge to them. And when we had goals that were super important to us, we knew how much money we had to give. There's an interesting thing called subjective wealth, which is this concept of when you give money to charity, it makes you feel more wealthy. So giving $500 to charity gives you the same kind of buzz as getting a $10,000 raise. So there's something in our brains that happens when we're more generous. Besides that, so there's a feel good from that. I also really believe that it loosens your grip on money when you can help other people, and that ends up bringing more to you. So we all remember what happened in 2008. It'd be hard, even though it's a while ago now, to forget that. But what I saw happen was the people I was working with at the time were hanging on so tightly to what they had. This concept of I'm not going to be okay, I'm not going to be okay. And what you can't see, because this is a webcast and you can't see me right now, but I'm making fists. And so if you imagine of hanging on tightly to what you have, you really can't receive when you're in that situation. And I know that for even through 2008, I was giving the same percentage. I stopped and I thought, oh, should I do this? Revenue was certainly going down because the markets were going down. And I did, because it's part of a value that I really hold. And in 2008, my income didn't go up, but it actually didn't go down. And I know that wasn't the case for a lot of people.
Right.
So I know that automatic savings and automatic giving are super important. It also personally allowed our family to do some wonderful things. We've taken volunteer vacations all over the world, and that came out of our giving account. So I would never be prescriptive in terms of where you should give. I don't have to talk with this group about the benefits if it's a qualified charity and the tax benefits of that, but maybe your giving is to a family member who's in need. Whatever it is for you, I know that when you loosen your grip, it allows you to be more calm and have more money coming in. I would also say that from a business perspective, we'll talk just about giving what you want to get now. So from the beginning of my career, I was very lucky to learn about a generous way of networking. And there was a woman named Suzanne Stone who really taught me a lot about networking very early in my career. And what she said was, Ellen, you should give what you want to get. We were in a networking group back then that was kind of like a leads group. And her strategy was to stand up each month at that group and be the person who gave the most referrals. And she said, people are going to want to know me. I'm going to do well for them. And you reap what you sow. So I adopted that strategy. And I've always been someone, if I want more referrals, I'm out there giving more referrals. And I want to be super clear that this is not a give to get. That's old school and it just doesn't work anymore. So it's not like, Steve, if I give to you, that's fine, but you better give back to me. It's more if I give. So for example, there's a mortgage broker that when I had my practice, I gave lots of referrals to her because she did a great job for my clients. That's what I cared about. I don't think I ever got a good referral from her in all the years I referred to her, but I got them from other people. Because when you're out there doing good work, it will come back to you and not necessarily from the same person. Would also say, though, as you're out there giving to people, there is this law of reciprocity, and you're building what my friend Deborah Poneman calls as relationship capital. So if I had a request from that mortgage broker when I supported her all those years, I built up the permission to ask for her help, and it was actually one of my best strategies. And so I was very deliberate about setting goals about how many referrals I would give. So I think that that's a very important strategy, to give what you want to get. And I think we can talk about volunteering next.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so there's lots of benefits from volunteering. So let's just start with well-being. Volunteering makes you happier and healthier. There's been tons of research on this. People who volunteer tend to live longer. Kids who do generative acts, that's making things better for other people, grow up to be more successful and they have less depression. So we know that it's a good thing. We feel good when we volunteer. Now, I find that sometimes, I know there's advisors out there doing amazing volunteer work in the world, but sometimes they're quiet about it. They don't necessarily share it. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do volunteer work to get accolades or so you can brag to your clients, but you also don't have to be quiet about it. People want to do business with good people, and they want to know what you're up to. So there's certainly subtle ways you can do this. You can do it by, when a client asks, what have you been up to? You can share that. When we've done a lot of volunteer work in Ghana, and we've taken our kids there several times now. And so in my office, for example, I had a picture of Amy with some of the kids that she met when we were in Ghana. So it gives the ability to start a conversation around that. The other thing, this is logical, when you're out there volunteering, you may meet people that expand your network. They might be centers of influence or potential clients for you. They know that you're a good person. They've seen you do good things in the world, and they will assume, probably appropriately, that you're going to do a good job for them too, because they've seen your work in another setting. You may also want to consider volunteering with your team and your clients. I am on a board of a bank and I do some consulting with them in Chicago. And there's, it's 3 or 4 times a year we do volunteer projects as a team. It's a great team building exercise. We have an event coming up. Sadly, we lost a young team member, and we're doing an event in memory of him, which he would have really appreciated. So there's all sorts of ways you can include volunteer work, not only in your personal life, which I'm assuming you're already doing, but also in your business. And I've heard advisors do volunteer projects with clients so that you're getting to do some good work with them in the world as well. Another way to be generous is through the way that you gift to clients. So one example would be, so when my business turned 25 years old, I wanted to celebrate. And what I decided to do was send out a letter to all my clients offering to make a $100 donation to their charity of choice. And this did a couple of wonderful things. First of all, it made me feel good. I was able to make contributions to things that were important to them. Almost all of my clients that I sent the letter to took me up on it. They thought it was really amazing. And then from a client service or marketing standpoint, I then had information on what was important to them and their favorite charities. So as they had other events in their life, I could continue to support things that were important to them. Also, when I would give gifts to my clients, to the extent that it made sense and I would give a gift that had some purpose behind it, so that there was some charitable component. For example, there's an organization called Prosperity Candles, and they make gifts made by refugees. They're beautiful candles. So you're giving, if that's something that would be appropriate for one of your clients, you're giving them a lovely gift, and each candle had a note in it that says who the refugee it was made by. And there used to be an organization in Chicago that made soaps made by women getting back into the workforce. So I was giving those for a while. At client events, when I started my career, I would give like blankets with my company's name or mugs, and like no one cares about that. Like I'm so clear on that now. So I started to try to give gifts that had a charitable component. There's a bakery in the area that cookies, they're wonderful, delicious cookies, and they're made by developmentally disabled adults. So there was a giving component in that as well. And you may, and I know some of you are already doing this, you may consider making a donation in lieu of a holiday gift. Or what we have done for our business is we send out Valentine's Day cards. Always make a heartfelt, I'm making air quotes, a heartfelt donation to a charity that I think my clients would appreciate. So sometimes it was the Red Cross if there was a big, weather event like Katrina, something like that. Otherwise, it might be a food pantry, something that I think would be meaningful to them. And I would make really pretty cards with a quote from me. So my name would be in front of them and something that they might consider keeping. So on one side, it would be a pretty card with a quote, and on the other side, it would talk about the donation. So constantly I'm adding in charitable components to really everything that I would do with my clients. And the next part would really be with your team. I think sometimes we're so focused on our families and our clients that it's easy to ignore your team, but being generous with them will help your entire business and certainly with your clients. I mean, clients want to know that you're a generous boss and that you're good to your team. So how are you being generous with them? Well, people crave to be engaged at work and having meaning in their work. So one thing that is really important is to share the difference that you're making in your clients' lives with them. The way my office was set up is that clients would walk through the office and pass by my entire team's offices, so my clients could hear how when they were thanking me, and I would say, well, Anne really did that work, and they'd pop their head in and thank Anne if that was the person who was helping them. We feel good when we know we're making a difference for people. And it's so important that there is meaning. Everybody craves that. And then you can find other ways to be generous with your team. You know, people tend to think, oh, I'm paying them well, which is great. Of course, you should pay your people appropriately and fairly. But maybe there's other ways to be generous with them. You can be generous with your listening with them and really pay attention. You know, I think we're good at listening to our clients, but are you really giving your full attention to your team? You can be generous with doing things that they'll love. Like we had for many years someone coming in giving chair massages because it felt good. Like who wouldn't, I don't know, who wouldn't like that? I guess some people wouldn't, but the people that worked for me loved it. We would do spa days. I had all women working for us. There's other things that you can do. And I think the idea is to do things that your team will think is really generous.
Yeah, as I hear you talk about it, I mean, really, Ellen, these ideas are practical and they're doable and in their own way logical. And obviously, you've succeeded with this. So we're at that base level. So you're passing this on to advisors. Why is this? Just let me ask you. You know, why is this topic so important to you to share with advisors?
Well, I know that we can have a huge difference in the world, right? So, what I love about the work that advisors do is that we help people meet their goals and we help ease strain and stress around money. People have so much angst around money, and this is whether they have it or not. I know that many of you out there have worked with really wealthy people who still worry about their money. And that generosity and having a focus on this can make such a difference. You know, the thing that drives me to be out there speaking and speaking with financial advisors and speaking with end clients is this vision that if people can get past this thought of, am I going to be okay, to how much can I give, the whole world will be different. Excuse me. And there's an interesting study about the ripple of generosity. You know, even watching someone else do a kind act makes you feel good. And there was a study done by James Fowler from University of California, San Diego, and Nicholas Christakis of Harvard that shows when one person behaves generously, it inspires others to behave generously later towards different people. And they found that altruism could actually spread 3 degrees from person to person. And so your being out there being generous can have a huge influence on dozens or even hundreds of people, maybe who you haven't even met yet.
Right.
So if advisors can be generous, inspire their clients, I mean, just imagine how different the world would be. And I just love this quote from Gandhi. It says, in a gentle way, you can shake the world. And I know that this is what advisors, what we can do.
Yeah, that's great. I love that quote. You know, something I've noticed, and just to kind of comment on this, is when it comes to charitable planning in general, as far as dealing with financial matters, which is obviously the focus of what we deal with here at the American College, it's usually treated as like a separate subject. Whether we're talking about retirement planning or estate planning, I mean, think of it, it's typically the separate chapter that's laid in the book. And you know, you're coming at it from a different way, but there's so many uses, and we already have a question that someone's raised about, you know, where it fits in from a tax standpoint. Is there is, you know, you can do well by doing good, and so you think about how it can be used as a planning tool. So, like in tax planning, it's a great way to generate an income tax deduction where it's deductible, and therefore it helps clients get, you know, below various income thresholds like Medicare Part B or the net investment income tax or that kind of thing. And of course, it's become a challenge because of the expanded standardized deduction. So we had a person post a question about have things really changed from a giving standpoint, a charitable giving standpoint, because of that. So now, when you mentioned that more people are looking at donor advised funds because they can make the donation in the year they need it for tax planning, but they can later on designate who they want it to go to as long as it's a charitable organization. Or the idea of bunching. Somebody mentioned that in the Q&A up here, where we work with clients on maybe to get past the standardized deduction, bunching their charitable deductions between 2 years. or estate planning is another area. We use philanthropy not only as a way of giving for the greater good, which is certainly a huge part of estate planning, but also, frankly, as a way to shelter heirs from capital gains and transfer taxes. And I wanted to pass on one of the most enjoyable cases I ever worked on was helping an elderly entrepreneur gift her business to a local university using a charitable remainder trust. And I was working with the insurance advisor and the CPA. And let me tell you, she saved all kinds of taxes using a CRT, but clearly the true benefit, and that's really getting to what you're talking about, Ellen, was how she became even more involved with the university in retirement. Feeling a sense of true community. She's really been enjoying her retirement with her many activities with and on behalf of the university. It's great to see, but I have to say, it took a sizable tax advantage gift to kind of get her in the right place for this. And that's a place we could help. And you brought up something that I just want to riff on for a second, is that whole idea of people feeling like even if they have a high net worth, am I going to have enough to be able to give? And so some of the tools we talk about in retirement planning, when many of the people listening know about the bucket strategy or floor strategy for retirement income, to the extent we can make that client feel more comfortable that they're not going to run out of money, they're also going to be more generous. And so there is a logical tie-in between being generous and being a good advisor. One other thing I was going to mention and get back to you with some questions, but sometimes I've noticed philanthropy can entail some frankly self-serving goals. You can call it convenience or you could call it laziness. This year, just make it personal, I gave my RV to National Public Radio. And one thing, the tax break was fantastic, needed it this year, but I have to admit part of it was me being lazy. They literally hauled it out of storage and sent me a receipt for tax purposes. But kind of to your point, I got a bigger feeling of doing good than just the fact that they hauled it out for me and gave me a tax deduction. So I've seen this convenience factor play out with farmers who will donate their land. Or one that you often see is life insurance policy owners who give their policies to charity that they no longer really need. So let me ask you this, perhaps with the exception of the woman who gave a charitable remainder trust to donate her business that I talked about, the other examples I gave you are kind of pedestrian examples of charitable giving. They're largely for tax or convenience purposes, yet they're generous. I guess my question, is there a way to help clients and advisors reconcile these good giving tendencies with self-interest?
I think there's this feeling of it has to be selfless. And, the truth is we give because it feels good. It's like the dirty little secret with generosity. It feels good. I bet everyone listening can think back at a time they did something really nice for someone and they can remember that and how good it feels. And it's okay to have self-interest in giving. The person who's receiving it, the NPR doesn't care if you feel good or not. They got money and it's going to help them, right? So that doesn't really matter. And as I mentioned before, this idea of subjective wealth, even writing a charitable check helps us feel wealthier. And you may have seen this research before, but there's this standard thing that we hear, well, if you get past $70,000 of income, spending more doesn't necessarily make you happier. Well, Michael Norton out of Harvard found that it actually does make you feel happier if you spend it on other people. Because when you have altruistic behavior, it releases endorphins in the brain and makes us feel good. It's called the helper's high. So, as I mentioned before, even watching other people do kind acts inspires you and it makes you feel good. So that's why there was just a video on, I don't know if I was on YouTube or some website I was on, where they showed a kid who had given his Halloween candy because he found an empty basket because the people were out and there was no candy in there. So he started taking candy out of his pumpkin to, that he was collecting, so other kids would have some. It was shared millions of times because people like seeing people do kind acts, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Well, I already feel better that it's okay to give and have a little bit of an ulterior motive. Um, One thing that I want to remind our listeners is to keep in mind as we're talking about generosity is if you're going to be successful with this, it, at the practice level, it does involve planning and execution, and Ellen's already said that, but particularly with advisors who are helping their clients in these financial matters, it's important to be prepared to assist these clients with, I guess I'll call it the procedural steps to accomplish these giving goals. So I'm stating some of the obvious, but for example, clients want the feel-good benefits that come from giving, but they also want the financial rewards associated with giving in the form of a tax advantage. But remember, there are some real specific rules that must be followed in order to qualify giving for tax advantages when that is the intention. So you can't deduct political contributions and you can't deduct for services rendered, but you may be able to deduct a reduced amount for mileage. Nowadays, you need a receipt for virtually any gift of property or money, and if the gift's large enough, you have to actually get an appraisal. And I mean, those are just examples from the tax perspective. I think another thing is an advisor will obviously need to build in appropriate questions in the fact-finding process so that you can really get at what's in their head and who do they want to benefit and give, and how much are financial motivators involved and how much of it is just because they want to give. But to the extent there are financial issues there, you want good documentation. And then obviously another thing I suppose is monitoring the plan because there may be a change to the client's fortunes. Something may have gone wrong with their business and they can't give anymore and you have to adjust the plan, or maybe their philosophy about philanthropy has changed and you have to accommodate so that they're doing what they want to do. So what I'm saying is if generosity is to become part of a financial advisor's services, you need to build that into the process. And that's why I think it's great to have you here, Ellen, because I think you're showing us that it can be done at the practice level with both purpose and frankly results. So thank you very much for bringing that up and talking about it. But let me ask this, before we get into the Q&A and finish it up, I looked at your TED Talk, I've looked at your book. Can you tell listeners a little more how they can find out some of your materials and kind of thing? Because I think a lot of them will do more of this if they feel more comfortable with how to do it.
Sure. Sure. Well, easy place to find me is at ellenrogin.com. That's ELLENROGIN.com. And I do have a special report that I think will be helpful. I created a report from articles I've written and things that I've done over the years when I had my practice to build it and serve clients well. And there's also a list of 25 ways to build generosity into your business and your marketing plan. And that's at ellenrogin.com/what clients crave. And our book, Picture Your Prosperity, is available on Amazon. It's very advisor friendly and it really helps walk people through how to create a visual plan, a visual financial plan. There's some tactical things in there. And also there's a big weaving in of how generosity can help build prosperity.
And one of our listeners asked, where is the TED Talk? I know the answer, but can you tell them?
Yeah, the easiest way is if you just go to YouTube and type in TEDx Ellen Rogin, it'll come up. And it's about how to teach your kids about money in unexpected
Yeah, I
ways.
really want to recommend that one because that was very specific to that issue. And my kids are adults and there's some things I wish I had done before. So for those of you with children or clients with children, that's a particularly good focused presentation. Nicely done. Let's see. Well, as a reminder, see if any other questions come up. In the meantime, I do want to remind everybody that why we do these webinars is our theory is all boats rise with the tide. And so we provide this information, but we hope it might encourage you to check out some of the things the American College provides in certifications and designations, and particularly the one that's coming out of the center here, which is the Retirement Income Certified Professional. Because again, as I said earlier, when you learn things like bucket strategies and flooring strategies and get that client to that comfort level where they feel like they can afford to be more generous, then you can really work with them in being generous. So more and more, the RICP has become the premier designation in the industry to do what I've lately been calling a deep drill down and decumulation. Try to say that fast. You take 3 courses and it gives you the knowledge and the status, if you will, to get where you need. So one last thing before we go to Q&A and wrap it up, but we're taking December off from these webinars, but I wanted to suggest you put on your calendars January 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern for our next American College webinar. Our guest is going to be a friend of mine, Chris Morton. He's the Executive Vice President at AALU. And we thought it'd be a great topic, talking about legislative and regulatory activity that affects us going into 2020. I mean, I think by then we may have the Secure Act to talk about. We'll see, but we'll certainly have an upcoming election to discuss. I live in Iowa, so that's all we hear about. And who knows what's going to happen between now and then in the court. So be aware of that. Well, it looks like we have some time for questions if we have any. Ellen's still on the line. Yeah, I should mention some of you, we already have people putting notes in, but the box on the right, the chat box is where we have it. I see there was a comment about asking about the CAP designation, and that's also a 3 test course that actually is in the area of philanthropic planning. It's a great add-in for those of you that have heard this, and especially Ellen, you made a great point about this. Sometimes the advisors become bored, and so adding this in is one of their skill sets, especially as their clients get older and wealthier. It's kind of this new area of expertise to add to it. I really like the idea. Do you find that actually as advisors get older that they get more interested in charitable giving, or is that just a hope we have?
I think it depends on the advisor, and I think it depends on, I don't know that it's necessarily age related. I was pretty young when I started thinking about this, but I think you're right to think about if, as clients get older and they really know how much money they have and what they're going to potentially need, it's a beautiful opportunity to find these strategies. And it's also a wonderful way to bring up the conversation with clients. I rarely had people bringing it up with me. And so if there's ways you can have this conversation and have people feel more comfortable and show them not only the emotional and psychic benefits that you get from being generous, but clearly, depending on their financial situation, there can be significant financial benefits, which just gives you more to spend or more to give. So it's wonderful. And that designation is fabulous because it can be, simple strategies are simple, but there's ones that may really serve your clients depending on who your client base is. And to have that certification through the American College is really wonderful to have.
Yeah, we have found that just because that makes the advisor more comfortable as well. I'm curious from your own practice experience, are the tax and financial benefits as important as we as advisors think they are? And I know the answer is going to be it depends, but was your experience that your clients would fairly quickly ask what are the financial tax benefits, or is that more something that's for a lot of them an afterthought, just kind of in general?
No, well, I would say that was often our lead. Look, you can save money in taxes, because I don't know if I ever had any, maybe one in all the years I was an advisor, not care about saving money in taxes. I mean, everybody wants to do that. And especially if they have a big tax year, if there was a big influx of money, it's a real differentiator that you can, and a real value add for when you can show your clients how to not only make their financial situation better, but there's this other benefit of helping someone else. And most people are so super open to that. And some people are more motivated by the financial than the charitable, and that's okay too. It's all good if you're helping ease stress and helping your clients feel good, and also helping a charity. That's fabulous.
Yeah, and I'll put you on the spot with just one question, but I made the comment earlier about if you're going to do this in practice, you got to certainly have the ability to help them with an ongoing basis. So did you, in what you were doing, did you put an emphasis on knowing a lot of the tax and the administrative aspects of charitable giving, or is that something that you often referred out to their tax advisor, or any thoughts on how that should or should not be a part of a financial service practice?
Well, I think it should, if you don't have the expertise yourself, of course, to have those resources. I mean, my client base that I was working with at the time weren't business owners. Many of them didn't have the situation where we needed a more sophisticated charitable giving strategy. So it
Right.
wasn't really important for my client base. I mean, over the years, there was a few times I did that, and I usually brought in people with more expertise. But where I really focused is I was doing good, and it was also, well, I don't want to sound uh, like with the wrong attitude about this, but it was a great marketing strategy.
Right. Right.
People, social impact businesses, you are all running social impact businesses. You're helping people feel better about their money. And as you're out there being a good person, that's who people want to do business with. They're going to, like I said before, it's putting out corporate halo around you. And I can't really see a downside from doing this. You feel better, you get more business, your staff's more engaged, and your clients are happy. And you're making a difference in the world.
Well, I think with that very positive message, this is a good point at which I can, again, thank you for providing the wisdom of what you've learned in your own experience and passing on the message. And the Gandhi thought this can get to, we can change the world. So, oh, we have some more questions. Just a second here. I'm a younger advisor and I have a passion for helping people move from, as you said, am I okay, to how much can I give? Would you recommend generosity as a viable actual niche or area of expertise when considering how to market myself? That's a good question.
That is a good question. Um, I love that you work as a financial advisor. You can help them know they're going to be okay. And um, some of the benefit is helping people that wouldn't normally think about this. But I think it's a really interesting niche to have. And if that was going to be a strategy, I would certainly go for a designation. So the more complicated strategies.
Mhm.
Um, I think that would be really important. I didn't have that as a separate niche. It was kind of like an overlay in terms of the clients that I worked with, that they knew that's how I rolled. It's how my employees knew that we rolled, is that we were out there, everything we did, trying to see if there was a way to be more generous with this. Um, so, I do think that it's important, and I have had people in other businesses kind of made a statement they're not going to do business with people unless there's some impact that they want to have. So
Mhm.
it's possible that that's a stand you can take. Like, look, this is really important, and we want to see a way we can help you feel comfortable to be more generous. But I don't have personal experience with that I can say, oh, look, I did this and it worked.
Okay, that helps. And one of the questions we also had that I'll go ahead and address, but jump in if you have a more comment, is what's the best strategy for a client who wants to honor a loved one with charitable giving, start a foundation? And I will just say, this is why education is important, because people just assume foundations are the way to do it. But in many cases, with a foundation, you have to do more public reporting and exposing than you can do with donor advised funds and some of the more private techniques. So you have the overall goal of honoring a loved one, you have some wealth to work with. This is really why it comes in handy. One of the things to consider is if you have a particular cause in mind, often there is a planned giving, typically an attorney or accountant that can help on some of these questions. So it's not just the financial, but it's also how you organize this, because in some cases it's also a way of providing worthwhile training and jobs for your own family. So you get your kids involved in it, and they learn to give, like some of these large foundation families. So I just want to mention that. Is there anything you want to add, Ellen, as far as that question?
No, I would just echo that most charities have either their own donor advised fund or planned giving, and they'd be more than happy to step in with a client. But to have, yeah, and to, no, I would say don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. But to be more
Right.
clear on what the objectives are, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Remember what the prize is, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've got that. And so again, very much want to thank you, Ellen. Congratulate you on the success you've had both in your own practice and now as a noted author and speaker. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you. What a joy to be here with you all today. Thank you.
And thank you to everybody, and have a happy holiday, and we'll have our next meeting like this in January. Thank you very much.